Welcome back, everybody. It is the final day of the National Energy Summit in Washington, D.C. Top CEOs, lawmakers, politicians, everyone meeting there to talk about ways to try and energize the future. And joining us first on CNBC this morning is Commerce Secretary Gary Locke. He is delivering the keynote address today. And Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure, Becky.
You know, one of the huge issues at the Energy Summit are people talking about green jobs, trying to figure out ways that we can create more jobs. I know that the administration just announced that it's going to start posting the number of stimulus-created jobs in the next month on the web, that people will be able to track these things. But when you look around, how many new jobs are we creating, and what can we do to create more?
Well, we're really creating thousands of jobs right now, and so many companies that have been receiving grants from the Recovery Act have been talking about the hundreds of jobs that they will be providing and creating just in the next few months, with grants for battery research, for electric cars, solar cells, panels, wind turbines, et cetera, et cetera. But really the key is providing the incentives for these new jobs to occur, because if we don't, China's going to create these jobs. China is right now spending hundreds of millions of dollars on energy efficiency, and they're going to be creating all this technology and selling it to the world. We need to get into the game, and we can truly be the leaders of the world and provide the jobs, good paying jobs for people here at home, while addressing the climate energy needs of the entire world. And that's why it's really important that we focus on entrepreneurs, and that's why today I'm announcing the creation of an Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, because we know, quite frankly, that entrepreneurs, companies less than 5 years old, have accounted for virtually all of the net new jobs created in the last 25 years. And so this office will report directly to me, and we're going to have a national advisory committee of the most esteemed entrepreneurs, venture capitalists in the country to help create the policies and the focus on what's needed to move these great ideas into jobs.
You're just announcing this new office right now?
We're announcing that today, and you're the first that we're publicly revealing it.
Which venture capitalists have you been talking to, and will you be working with on this project?
Well, we know that they're great venture capitalists and also innovators. When you think about Bill Gates and Dell and others who started virtually in garages, I mean, these are the people that have spawned incredible companies, thousands and thousands of jobs, but they started as really small entrepreneurs. Again, these new startup companies in the last 25 years, they started small, but they accounted for virtually all of the net new jobs in those last 25 years. And since then, they've grown into large companies employing thousands and thousands of people. We need to really look at the policies and programs that can help translate these new ideas into great companies, startup companies, but also into economic growth.
How can you cut through some of the red tape? Is that the idea behind this office, that you help innovate, you cut through bureaucratic red tape, you make it easier for them to flourish?
Well, we know that, for instance, there's this so-called valley of death, where people have great ideas but don't have the capital in which to really move to the next level, to really implement their ideas and get up and running as viable companies. We're going to be looking at some of those issues. Also, the notion of research and development that occurs in colleges, universities, in the federal laboratories. How do we translate that into commercial products and get those into the private sector as quickly as possible? What are just the policies that impede entrepreneurs, people who have great ideas, from actually starting up a business? And so we'll be looking at all the red tape and all the bureaucracies and just the whole systemic problems facing entrepreneurs. And of course, one of them is healthcare.
Right.
I mean, so many people who want to start a business are afraid to, because, they work for a company with great healthcare benefits. If they try to go off on their own, how are they going to pay for these premiums that sometimes are $25,000 a year for their own family? How are they going to pay for the premiums for their own employees to attract people from other companies, great companies, to form that team of ideas, inventors, and so forth, that will become the next Microsoft, the next Dell, the next eBay, the next Google? That whole notion of healthcare costs is a real disincentive for people to start new companies.
But Secretary Locke, it's not just the new companies that have concerns about what's been happening. It's also existing major companies who have huge concerns about what's been happening in terms of policy in this nation versus around the world. Yesterday I spoke with Chad Holliday from DuPont, who was at that conference, and he pointed out that they have a brand new thin film solar plant that's going to be opening. He's very excited. It's going to create a lot of jobs, but that plant is opening in China, not here in the United States, because the policies in China, the tax incentives, are much better than here in America. Is there anything we can do to provide incentives to those big companies to make sure that they continue to open plants right here in the United States?
Well, in fact, that's part of the president's proposal, and funds have been set aside, and tax incentives and grants have been made available under the Recovery Act. Tens of billions of dollars will be available in the energy sector, from research and development to actual grants to companies to get started. And that's exactly the issue that we face, competition from China. Will these jobs occur here in America, where we provide the technology and the equipment for people all around the world to address climate change, or will the jobs be created in China instead? And a big factor in making China more competitive or making the United States less competitive against China is the rising cost of healthcare. I mean, I have companies that have told me that this year alone, they saw a premium increase, a cost of providing healthcare to their employees jump by almost 30%. Last year alone, the average was 15%. There's no way that companies can be viable, competitive, when they're facing rising healthcare costs of 15% one year and 27 to 30% this year. What's it going to be next year?
Right. Secretary Locke, Carl is standing by in Pittsburgh, where he's covering the G20, and he has a question for you as well.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Secretary. I wanted to get your take on security. Good morning. I wanted to get your take on security here in Pittsburgh, which is obviously probably the tightest in the city's history. You were governor of Washington back in '99, when we all remember the uprising in Seattle and the hundreds of arrests. Why do these things draw so much organized protest, and have we learned how to keep things from getting out of control?
Well, obviously, the WTO riots in Seattle in 1999 were a wake-up, and it shows that there's a lot of concern about globalism, a lot of misunderstanding about that, and quite frankly, a lot of the issues of the WTO are to help developing countries, the poorest countries, improve the standard of living for their people, where so many of the population don't even have electricity, don't even have, and are facing so much famine and poverty and disease. And the issue is, how do we help them come into the economic mainstream and at the same time protect jobs among the developed countries like the United States? So it's in our humanitarian interest to help these developing countries and to allow for expanded trade, but also fair trade. And so there are so many issues that are at play, whether people are concerned about genetically modified organisms in foods, to people concerned about losing jobs here, to a whole host of other issues, to political issues. And you see them all converge when you have leaders from the major countries from around the world gathering.
Secretary Locke, I just had a quick question. We've had some guys on that are nonpartisan. David Walker, a Harvard professor. They expressed some disappointment that the actual cost side, cutting down on the cost of health care, seems to take a backseat to adding 47 million new people. I hear what you're saying about getting the burden off of corporations, but aren't you just really transferring a burden and a bloated system to the government, which may or may not be better at controlling costs?
Well, we know that a lot of the burden that companies face in terms of the rising cost of health care is because of the tens of millions of people who are uninsured. And so when they show up at the emergency rooms, governments are having to pay for it, or the hospitals are charging off that emergency care that should never have been done in an emergency room, to the people who pay the rest of those hospital bills, which are insurance companies. And so there's a huge cost shift going on. And so many corporations that I've talked to have said that, yes, we need to drive down the cost of health care. That's why some corporations actually very much favor the government option to compete with the insurance companies, to keep the insurance companies from unnecessarily raising their rates. But the other issue is that they also feel that we have to take care of the uninsured, because in the end, it's government and businesses through health care premiums that are paying for the medical care, more expensive than necessary, for the uninsured.
All right, Secretary Locke, we want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you soon.